Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, who I'm the author of 4 novels. My latest, True Grace, historical fiction, came out in September. And this podcast now is 2.5 years old. And I hope you've enjoyed meeting all of the writers and creators that I have introduced you to. And I have somebody really interesting to introduce you to today. Hey, Rich.
Hi, Howard. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. So Rich has such, so he writes under R. Lee Proctor, but his name is Rich. So I'm going to call him Rich.
Good.
And he has such an interesting background. So I just want to share that with you. And then we'll ask him some questions about it. So he has made a living as a radio disc jockey. I really want to hear about that. An advertising copywriter, a writer producer for cable TV, and a writer in the themed entertainment business. And then a few minutes ago, he told me that he was writing for, it was history or what was that? The one with Lincoln.
I work for a company called BRC Imagination Arts, and we did the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois. And I did all of the content for it. I did the journeys and the shows and that kind of thing. So I spent 5 years befriending Mr. Lincoln.
I like him already. All right. So, and he's an author. So tell us a little bit with that interesting background. How did you decide to take on, being a novelist?
Well, it has kind of occurred to me, all these things I've done, advertising, being a disc jockey. I was an entertainment reporter for a station in Los Angeles. I worked for Walt Disney Imagineering, doing theme park attractions. Now I work here. Every single one of those things, I realized kind of later in my life, was about storytelling. They were only effective if, like when I did radio advertising, I worked for a company that produced comedy radio ads. And they were only effective if they were about one thing and at a beginning, middle, and end. And like everything, they invited the listener in. You're overhearing a conversation, and at the end, you get an unexpected twist at the end. So when I did cable TV segments, okay, what's it about? How do you get people into the tent? How do you carry them along? And then how do you give them a twist at the end that makes it memorable? So, and there came a point when I had all these ideas for books. I just said, I'm just going to dive in. And I use those same principles. The truest thing I ever heard about storytelling came from a wonderful film director named Billy Wilder. He directed The Apartment. He directed Something Like It Hot. Yeah. Somebody asked him the secret of successful storytelling, and he said, make people want something and then give it to them. And the tricky thing is to make people want something. The first act or the first third of any book is drawing them into the world and introducing them to a character, and that character has something they really want that aligns with the audience's emotional, needs, and then at the end, you give them away. You give it to them in a way that's unexpected but satisfying.
Yes. So, do you think I need to change the way I end my podcast? I need to come up with a twist.
Well, I think that a podcast is slightly different. You mix up the questions, and I think you're doing just fine with the podcast.
Thank you. So you write both. Not both. You write narrative nonfiction.
Right.
You write self-help books.
Right.
And you write novels. So. Right. Is anyone more your favorite? Like a dad with 3 kids. Do you have a favorite kid, or it's all the same?
Well, here's the key. The self-helpy books I've written. I wrote a book called The $1 Million Sticky Note and The 50-Minute Coach. They're both really novellas. They're both stories that have at the center of them a nugget of usable knowledge that people can take with them. So in other words, they're about a character who is usually facing an emotional crisis, who, in the case of the $1 million sticky note, this character is actually like thinks his life is a waste and is going to commit suicide. And somebody comes up to him and says, I can save your life. I got a sticky note here. It's got 3 words on it. And those words, and you pay me $1 million and I'll give you the sticky note. And of course, the guy thinks he's being ripped off, but the person says, here's the deal. After 72 hours, if you don't think it's worth $1 million, I'll give you your money back. So, now the question for the reader is, what are the 3 words, which then are on the sticky note? And at first he thinks he's ripped off, and then he applies the words to his life. And then he realizes that, he gets his life back and it's worth all the money he paid.
So cool. What a really intriguing and cool premise.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That is something. So, your latest book is Sugar Ball, right?
Well, actually, my latest book is a book called Claude Monet Designs Yankee Stadium, a Love Story. But
Yes.
the book before that, and I'm happy to talk about that, is called Sugar Ball, which is a novel about Negro League baseball. And
I want to hear about both because they're both so interesting. So tell me about Sugar Ball. What inspired that? Why Negro baseball?
Yeah. Here's the thing that I kind of.
Are you a closet Negro?
I am starting with my father's collection of 78 RPM records, which was almost exclusively devoted to Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Jimmy Lunsford and all of the great band leaders. I was, and then I became interested in baseball, which led me to Negro League baseball because of the heroism of the players who played it, because they were playing for the pure love of the game, because there was no money in it, and the barriers they faced were staggering. Anyway, as I was going through the history of Negro League baseball, I came upon this incident in 1937. It's a true story. Everything I'm going to tell you is true. 1937. The greatest team in baseball, in Negro League baseball, was the Pittsburgh Crawfords. They had Satchel Paige, Cool Papa Bell, and Josh Gibson, 3 greatest players of all time. A guy shows up in Pittsburgh named Dr. Enrique Ibar from the Dominican Republic and says to Satchel Paige, here's a suitcase with $30,000 in it. I want you to bring 8 other players to the Dominican Republic and play in a baseball tournament for 2 weeks. And then you take whatever you want and you pay the other players whatever you want. And Satchel Paige, who, like all these guys, was making $50, $100 a month, says, that's a pretty good deal. So he jumps the team, goes to the Dominican. There's this glorious moment where he shows up in the Dominican Republic to play baseball, and there's no color barrier, and all these players are in heaven. They party like crazy. They lose the first game of the tournament. True story. This actually happened. They're put on a bus to go back to their hotel, but they're taken to a prison and lined up in front of a firing squad. At the last second, okay, there's ready aim. The guys raise their rifles a foot above the players, shoot. Rafael Trujillo, president of the Dominican Republic, comes out and says, I didn't bring you here to lose. So he discovers that the Dominican, being completely insane about baseball, he's running for president. There's a tournament going on, and if he doesn't win, he gets ousted. And so the players realize they're playing for their lives.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So is that incident in your book?
Yeah. The book is about the Pittsburgh Crawfords going on tour. They get the offer to go to the Dominican, and what happens in the Dominican.
It's and then this other one, the Monet and Yankee Stadium. Tell us about that.
Now that's a pure novel. But then once again, it's based on a crazy fact of history, which is that Yankee Stadium was completed in 1923, and Claude Monet didn't die until 1926. So, and in 1919, France was supposed to build a dedicated Claude Monet museum, but Georges Clemenceau, president of France, was voted out of office and the museum was canceled. So the joke of the piece is an art lover, the president of the Yankees wants to build a stadium around Babe Ruth, his newest acquisition. His mistress is president of the Bronx Art League. She says, I'll give you the money, to build the stadium. He was a brewer and prohibition had come in, and so his bankroll is decimated. She says, I'll lend you the money if you'll hire Claude Monet, my favorite painter, to design Yankee Stadium. And it turned, Yankee Stadium is everything Monet would want. It's got a broad pasture where he can put his haystacks. It's got an outfield fence for his water lilies, and so it's about a guy who works at the New York Museum of Art who is a failed artist who, through a series of unlikely but highly motivated, beautiful plot twists, discovers this roll of paintings, 14 original Monets in the wall of a derelict building in the Bronx, and which is about $700 million worth of art. And is it possible it's actually happened? And there's a journal of Monet chronicling what he did, and how it all came about. So it's just a crazy caprice.
Very interesting man, Rich.
Yeah, the best and worst thing people say about my books is, that book is completely you.
I love it. So this is, what are you writing? What are you reading? So
Sure.
tell us a little bit about books that have inspired you.
Oh, let's see. But okay, well, certainly my first great love was I read one of my junior high school teacher gave me a book of short stories by Ray Bradbury. And I'd never read any fiction before. I basically was just reading about baseball. The Dodgers had just moved to Los Angeles, so I read these wonderful Ray Bradbury short stories, and it absolutely blew. It's one of those portals into another world where you see, oh, I see. Here's this whole other amazing world. That led me to, now I grew up in the 60s, so it led me to Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut. Eventually, I found my way to F. Scott Fitzgerald, probably, as somebody said, at the level of the sentence, the greatest writer in American literature. So, since that, then it's just been this lifelong love of reading.
Reading, yes, indeed. And is there anything that you've read recently that you could recommend to our audience?
Well, it's funny, when an author comes out with a new book, I usually read the new book and then go back to my favorite book. So Dennis Lehane, who is one of my favorite writers, just wrote a book called Small Mercies, which led me back to, I think, one of my two contenders for the great American novel, The Given Day, which you'll, as somebody who likes writing about history, is really about Boston in 1919, the police strike, the flu, the influenza epidemic, and also the selling of Babe Ruth. It's this fascinating thing about, and it's also about the clash of white and black cultures and all those things. It's just magnificent. Anyway, Stephen King has a new book called, I think it's called Holly, which led me back to what I think is the second my nominee for the great American novel, which is The Green Mile, which has everything. It has spirituality, it has race prejudice, it has social justice. It's just
A great book.
and it's a barn burner. It's a page turner. I said that to me is a magic trick. So, and
Yeah.
the third book is very important. I just enjoyed is a book called True Grace by Karen E. Osborne. I saw this book and I downloaded it and I said, this is everything I like, which is it's an immersion in history. You can tell from Sugar Ball, I love history. And it has everything I like in the sense that you get to go back to that period and you get to live inside of it. And you get to, you go into this character who's truly worthy, who is somebody who's fighting for something important. It's the make people want something and give it to them. You so want that person, is a Grace, to succeed. And it was just like, okay, well, that was a really good read. And I want to urge everyone to get it and read it.
Very, very kind of you. I did not ask him to do that or pay him to do that.
That's right. I can certify she didn't ask me to do that, And I was going to be on the podcast, so I said I better figure out what to do. It was like, holy cow, I have done well here.
Well, this is just such a pleasure meeting you and speaking to you and listening to your crazy but wonderful stories. How does our audience stay in touch with you? How can they follow you?
Uh, I have to admit, I'm not the greatest person at social media. I am on Facebook. I have my Amazon authors page. I'm about to start a Substack here pretty quickly. And I have a blog at Proctor at WordPress.com. So those are ways to do it. But I would so invite people to go to the Amazon page and download the books. I really try to write popular fiction, popular fiction.
Yes, yes. So please do that. Go to Amazon, buy his books, read his books. And then one of the things that helps us writers that we so appreciate is if you like it, write a review. It
Oh
makes
yes.
all the difference. And especially a new book that's out, just gives it that little extra. So we do ask you, follow Rich, let him know that you met him here,
Yeah.
and buy his books and write wonderful, wonderful reviews.
If you like the
Thank
book.
if you like the book. If you don't like the book, don't write any
Oh, no, no,
reviews.
no. That's you can take a pass. Yes, let it pass by.
Thank you so much, Rich, and thank all of you. I'll see you next week on the next episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? Have a great week.